Today we're going to break down and dissect the body language of Joseph Ferlazzo. Greg, tell us about the videos we're going to watch.
Yeah, let me tell you what the jury thought. The jury thought that he was guilty of first-degree murder. The verdict came back last week. He killed his wife, Emily, in Vermont while they're on vacation. And that's all you really need to know to start with this video. I'll add one thing. I believe this is direct from defense, and you'll be able to tell by the questioning style.
Hi. So we're going to start talking about the weekend of October 16th. Are you ready?
That's ready. I'm going to be.
Okay. I think you testified that you drove from New Hampshire to Bolton and arrived around 5:30-ish. Is that about right?
That seems right. It was still light out.
Still light out.
Yes.
And this was mid-October.
Right.
Okay. And during the drive, what kind of mood were you in?
Great mood. Yeah. We spent, well, I guess close to 11 months, like working on Rosie. And this was our first like road trip as a family. So it was very exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Emily too, she was in a good mood?
Yeah, she was super excited to take Rosie out, and she was stoked to meet Nikki and Ariel.
Okay. So you get to Vermont, and where in Bolton do you go?
We went to the Bear Run condos. My sister rented one of the she rented a Airbnb condo. So we went to, it was like, there's 3 large buildings, and I think it was the last building.
Okay. Where did you park?
Parked in the parking lot outside of the building. There was a nice flat spot, and for anyone who's ever driven like an RV, like finding level ground is it's like winning the lottery. So,
What?
well, typically if you don't find level ground, then you have to level out the RV, or else everything's going to be, if you put something on the counter, it's just going to slide onto the floor.
Okay.
So you got to make everything level the best you can.
And so finding level ground was,
Yeah, it was great.
it was great.
Yeah.
All right, Greg, what do you got?
Well, you guys have heard me say before, I love a glass of water when I'm interviewing someone, when I'm interrogating someone, when someone's on the stand, because it's a poor man's lie detector. You watch that water jiggling in the glass, you can see he's feeling uncomfortable. Now we get a chance to talk about baseline. And I always say, people say you can't tell their baseline. They're on the stand. You're nervous. Well, yeah, you can. What we're looking for is the baseline on the stand, not the baseline at your house eating Cheetos on your couch, as I always say. Watch him, how carefully he places that glass. And this is just because he knows he's on trial for murder, so he's on the stand. And wait until we get to hot topics, we'll see something else. But we get a pretty good baseline here. His brow comes up at working on Rosie, which is their RV, and you can see he's asking you, do you get it? He raises his brow to say, do you understand? He makes good eye contact on positive things, and everybody's going to go to eye accessing because he's looking down. This is not eye accessing mostly here. This is breaking eye contact to talk and think. When he goes to real emotional eye accessing, we'll see it. You will not be mistakable when he does it. But he uses his hands to illustrate. There are 3 large condos, so we know he uses that in his baseline. And even when he's talking about being level and sliding off, Chase, you would call that body narration. I just lumped it in illustration, but same thing. Then that one place I do see what I think is accessing is when he goes to his upper left and he's talking about the parking lot of the building. I think we got a pretty good one here. He's talking to be fairly smooth, good cadence of eye contact and lack of eye contact. Looks like a good baseline for what this person normally talks like. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, agree. And already his breathing rate, which is how often we breathe, is super high, and it's into his chest. We breathe into our abdomen when we're relaxed, when we're more comfortable. And his lips are slightly parting, even though his baseline is to close them. And you can see this between these statements, but his lips have to part to allow for his body's demand for oxygen. That's exactly what you're seeing here. So let's examine how he's answering and discussing basic things here, like the condos that they rented. Pulling in, in the parking level and level ground, his breathing rate still high, not making eye contact until the very end of his statements, until the very end. We're going to talk about that. But this is an unusual cognitive load, or what I would call performance of processing. I think he's trying to fake a cognitive load here, is what we're seeing. While he's recalling these simple details about the condo and the parking, and people who make eye contact near the end of statements only, when it's not in their baseline, they're engaging in confirmation glances. This is checking to see, are they buying this? Are they believing this? How is this being received? How is what I'm saying being received by somebody else? And we know that this part of his face works because the upper half of his face is still. So while he's still trying to smile, it's extremely contained to the lower half. There's no animation at all up here. This is a fear response. It's not revealing weakness when you see these little punctuations up here and him raising his eyebrows. We know this part of his face works because you see it in this confirmation glance at the end of the clip. There's an eyebrow flash right there. And we're going to dig way more into this here in just a few seconds. Scott, what do you got?
All right. I agree with you. Yeah, you nailed a lot of stuff that I was getting to. But I think this is normal behavior for a person in this situation. So he's tense, he's all stiff, and his movements are really stiff. So that makes sense. He's apprehensive, which he should be at this point. He's wide-eyed, so he's worried about what's going on. You know, he's very cognizant of what's happening. So, and I agree with you on the fake excitement thing, trying to show something's going on, because his voice hits this weird tone a couple of times where he's trying to show like he's normal and everything's fine, and then at least show some kind of emotion, which we don't get a lot out of this. All the movements of his mouth and all those things, they're normal when you see this kind of stress. So this is a great example. I think you found a great clip, Greg, for his baseline, because this is showing everything. I think the shirt and tie he's wearing are probably uncomfortable for him because he probably doesn't wear that kind of thing a lot. So it's as he's sitting there going through that, I think it's probably a constant reminder. He's got tattoo sleeves, so he's got these sleeves all buttoned up. So I'm sure that's bothering him. And that's a reminder of what's going on at the same time. Not that he doesn't understand what's going on, and not that he doesn't know what's happening, but it's just that constant reminder of, hey, man, here's what's going on. You're in trouble. You're about to get in trouble. Hey, man. So it's that constant reminder, which also drives the stress up. It's that little inner dialogue thing that keeps circling in his brain. My wife is a private investigator, and I asked her, how do you find out so much information about these people you're looking into? And she said, the internet, Google. And that's because data brokers sell your information to scammers, spammers, and anybody else who wants to target you. Your full name, your email address, your home address, your health records, your relatives, it's all out there. That's why I've been using Aura, the sponsor of today's video. Aura shows me which data brokers are selling my information and automatically submits opt-out requests for me. I don't have to do anything. So I used Aura to find out how many of these data brokers are selling my information. I couldn't believe it. Cleaning up my information not only helps reduce the amount of spam I get, but it helps protect me from hackers who could use that information to help them get access to my social media accounts, bank accounts, or other sensitive information. Aura also does so much more to protect me and my family from online threats I can't even see. With Aura, I get other features like antivirus, VPN, password management, parental controls, identity theft insurance, and more without having to download a bunch of apps. It's really easy to use, especially for somebody like me who's not a technical person, and I get everything for one affordable price. You may have one or two of these tools already, but not having Aura is like locking the front door but leaving the back door wide open. Aura is always on, doing the hard work keeping me safe so I can focus on other things and not have to worry about all that kind of stuff. I value my privacy, and I value yours. You can go to aura.com/TBP to start your free 2-week trial. That's aura.com/TBP, and there's a link for that in the description below. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, just all the same stuff. Greg, it is a really good baseline, great video to choose for that, because he's in a position here that nobody would ever hope to be in. You're on the stand for murder, and so there's nothing good about the position that he's in. but take a look at generally how relaxed he is in this situation. You know, he's as relaxed as you probably could be given the context that he's in, which is in big trouble right now. But he's been questioned likely by his attorney on stuff that he really has no great reason to make up any story around. So we're getting a really good baseline here. Scott, as you might say, everything is as it should be. So let's have another.
Hi. So we're going to start talking about the weekend of October 16th. Are you ready?
That's ready. I'm gonna be.
Okay. I think you testified that you drove from New Hampshire to Bolton and arrived around 5:30-ish. Is that about right?
That seems right. It was still light out.
Still light out.
Yes.
And this was mid-October.
Right.
Okay. And during the drive, what kind of mood were you in?
Great mood. Yeah. We spent, well, I guess close to 11 months, like working on Rosie. And this was our first like road trip as a family. So it was very exciting.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Emily too, she was in a good mood?
Yeah, she was super excited to take Rosie out, and she was stoked to meet Nikki and Ariel.
Okay. So you get to Vermont, and where in Bolton do you go?
We went to the Bear Run condos. My sister rented one of the she rented a Airbnb condo. So we went to, it was like, there's 3 large buildings, and I think it was the last building.
Okay. Where did you park?
Parked in the parking lot outside of the building. There was a nice flat spot, and for anyone who's ever driven like an RV, like finding level ground is it's like winning the lottery. So,
Right.
well, typically if you don't find level ground, then you have to level out the RV, or else everything's going to be, you know, if you put something on the counter, it's just going to slide onto the floor.
Okay.
So you got to make everything level the best you can.
And so finding level ground was,
Yeah, it was great.
it was great.
Yeah. Yeah, okay.
So the conversation you had, did it lead to an argument?
Yeah, there was an argument because she wanted to go hang out with her friends, and I told her that she came on the trip, and she told me prior, you know, earlier that day, she said she was here to meet my family, to hang out. Like, so I was very confused, like, well, now you say you want to leave, but we just got here. So,
So what did you do next?
well, I told her I was going to go, and then there was, you know, she started saying some very hurtful things and some very, like, threatening things if I was to go and leave her to her solitary. So yeah, that was the next thing that confused me, was like why are we getting threats all of a sudden?
Do you have any idea about what time of night this was?
This could have been somewhere, I'm going to estimate around 9 p.m.
So what did you do after that?
Well, I told her if you want to go, then go. Like, I don't want you to, I don't want you to be unhappy. If you don't want to be here, then don't be here. But up until now, like you said, you wanted to. So, I just need a moment. Well, what happened is I ended up staying in the bus with her.
What was she doing?
Well, she was having a fit, really. She was cussing and saying how shitty it was and how shitty I was for not giving her money to go have an Uber and like leave the vacation. And
Chase, what do you got?
One big one we're hearing right off the bat in this clip is there was an argument. So this is passive voice. You always want to be on the lookout for passive voice because there's no human involved in the statement there. There was an argument. So he's punctuating every beat of these statements with these eyebrow flashes, this confirmation or approval seeking behavior. When the attorney is asking these follow-ups, like, so what did you do next? His head jerks up to look at her during these prolonged silences. And when you see this behavior, somebody's silent and then they hear their name and their head jerks, this is either relief from the silence or fear, because fear increases our body's reaction speeds. And this happens a few times in this clip, and you're going to see it. He starts struggling to complete basic sentences here. And I want you to think back to how detailed he was about getting the RV onto a level spot and contrast that with his detail about hurtful things and solitary, which he uses here. There's an extreme loss of fluency, extreme hesitancy. And then he says, so that was the next thing. So that was the next thing. This is typical in deception. You'll hear, and the next thing was, and then the next thing. But look for clusters. It's typical in deception, but when you see it with clusters. And then he say, why are we getting threats all of a sudden? Why are we getting threats all of a sudden? Listen to that really quick and see if that's the wrong pronoun. So there was no mention of threats. If you think back to the fluid demonstration of him showing, even using his body, something on a countertop, how it would slide down in the RV. And then him saying, I just need a moment. And during that time, we have this uncertainty. And anytime you see the lips go past the teeth into the mouth, like this, you're seeing a need for reassurance, in my opinion here. And hesitancy locked down into this. I do think there's some internal dialogue here. And I think he's looking down and to his left to think about what to say, to kind of go through these processes. I think he's going through words in his head. But then we see mouth grooming. I guarantee you Greg's going to talk about this, and there's a 98% chance he'll mention horses as well here in just about 35 seconds. But he's saying throwing a fit, cussing, how shitty I am. This looks to be as truthful as the RV parking, which I also think was truthful. So I think when he's saying throwing a fit, how shitty I am, all that, I think that was truthful. I think that did happen. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, you know what, I'd tell you the same thing. I say a lot of what we're going to hear in here, I think what we call an embedded confession is when someone tells the truth even though they're not trying to. Often people are going to tell you a story. This is a story, clearly a story. Listen to the attorney asking questions. And Chase, I promise I'll talk a little bit about mouth grooming too. But when she's questioning, she's giving him leads. Mark, I'm no actor like you are, but I've done a lot of community theater, a lot of regional theater. And I went up on lines one time, and it happened to be in a courtroom drama. And I remember sitting there because every line from every prosecutor and every defense attorney is going to be the same thing. And then what? And after that. And so there's no trigger to remind you. If I were coaching this person, if I were the person who was preparing this person to be a witness, I would have said, keep it in small, concise boxes of information, not storyline. Because if you lose your place in the storyline, you are screwed. Screwed. And that's what I think we're seeing here. I think he's losing his place. And I think Chase, the reason he's rifling through words is it's literally like, oh, which words am I supposed to use this time and this time? Because he's got a story in his head to tell. Somebody's prepped him, and he's lost his cue. He's not an actor. This is not blocked well for him. He's just responding. So he knows what's coming. There's preparation. I think it's true when he talks about them arguing. Now, it's also from one point of view. Just because he says this happened this way, most people can't remember how an argument goes because they only see their half of it. So I agree with you. It's probably realistic that he thinks she said that because he's got the same cadence, same eye contact breaks, same illustrators at those same key points. There's confusion in his brow, and then it deepens, and he goes, And then I think he does go into finally an emotional eye accessing after he does that down left looking for information because his whole body arches. And when your head goes down in emotion and down to the right, you got 13 pounds of dead weight floating around up there, and it changes the physics of your body. So I think he can be emotional about her dying because what you guys didn't see, because I watched hours of this, unfortunately, is he at one point, they say, how do you feel? And he said, awful. And he said, why? Because of I'm just thinking of what happened to my life. Well, that's not exactly the answer you want to say instead of in front of a jury. Anyway, I think he's gotten into liar's loop. He's built a story. When I say liar's loop, he had to deconflict his story, pitch it, then defend it, and then deconflict it. I don't think he did all that. And I think he's in trouble. There's some other stuff in here I think that are pretty good. There's one last one in here. She was upset because I wouldn't give her money for an Uber. That's an interesting line, and one that would cause me to go, didn't she have her own money? Because people who are abusive often take money from the other person and ensure that they have to rely on them for it. And I know for a fact she was an RN, so she made money. Why did she need money from him? I would have asked. Could be a simple answer, could be, but of course this attorney is trying to make him look better, not worse. But if you're interrogating, you would have said, what do you mean she needed money from you? Why didn't she have money? And then you get a little bit of insight into their personalities. Scott, what do you got?
All right.
Oh, I forgot mouth grooming. One quick note.
Oh, yeah.
Since you said it, Chase. Yeah, all mouth grooming is to me is a person's feeling stress and they're thinking at the same time. And you're right about a horse. The reason I know that is horses move their mouth when they're thinking, and so do you. Little kids, I always say this, if you've never heard me say this, if you got a little kid and you didn't change it, they would be sitting in their office when they're 50 going, that's just what we do. And we're thinking our mouths move. Scott, what do you got?
Okay. All right. So I think this is really interesting. I think for me, it was one of the funniest things I've ever seen on any of our shows. I think it might be the funniest thing I've ever seen, where he's talking, then he stops and he slowly brings that glass up and then drinks out of it. Did it not kill anybody else? I thought that was the funniest thing I've ever seen on here. Talk about looking like you're not being honest. That would be, it's almost like a bit. And his eyebrows are really interesting here because they're kind of doing their own thing. You know, the expressions from the beginning of these throughout all these videos we see, we don't see an actual expression anywhere really. You know, we see small little changes, but not a full-blown anything in here. So from the first video to this one, there's no big facial expressions we see. And near the glabella, his left eyebrow is doing this really weird, I don't know, it looks like a worm or something. And I don't know what it's doing, but it's got its own thing going on. And so then after that, he describes what he did next. And during all that, what's odd is his cadence, his voice tone, his volume, all that's fine. His blink rate looks fairly normal for what's happening. But then again, we see more of those odd eyebrow movements. And another thing is he doesn't look at this attorney when he's answering. He looks at her for a sec briefly when she's asking the question, then he looks down and starts talking. So this is, you know, it's just odd behavior for something like that, because it's the whole time. Through every one of these videos, you'll see the same behavior. There's one time where he does look at her just for a minute, a little bit longer, but not for very much longer at all. And I think he at some points, I think he is reliving what was happening here, and he is going through things. But at the same time, he's trying to make it look like he's thinking about it and, you know, and worrying about it and being stressed about it. Where I think he's stressed, but not about doing those things. Well, I know that sounds crazy, but you'll see what I mean as we go along as this thing develops. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, I mean, already because we had this great baseline at the start, it's a bit of a walk in the park to kind of read this one, I would say. I'm just going to reiterate a lot that's already been said, but you're right, Scott, lots of eyebrow movement, whereas in the baseline, really very little eyebrow movement. So, okay, so that's one thing. We're getting some single shoulder shrugs as well. Now, of course, as Chase always says, that on its own means something or nothing, but mainly nothing. It's when we're putting everything together against this baseline, it's radical that we've got these eyebrows moving, single shoulder shrugs going on. And again, to your point, Scott, well, reiteration of it, like way less eye contact, way less. You're right, Chase. There was a specific point where he was doing the eye contact in the baseline, but it's now dropped, almost completely. So it's a radical difference. So this starts immediately when they start talking about the argument and that argument story. So there's a problem with this argument story, I would say. Then the time. He doesn't search for what time it was within the baseline, anywhere around the baseline that he was searching, where he was searching in the baseline. I'm not even going to go back as to where he was going. His eyes just don't go anywhere that they were going before. So it's like, okay, well, that's something or nothing, but with everything else, it starts to look like it's going to be something. So there's some problem with the time here that he's talking about. And then this thing of him needing a moment and the silence. I put down here probably deconflicting. They're trying to work out, hang on, what's the story I've got to tell here? He's either deconflicting, he's creating on the spot, and then I'm like, why hasn't he worked this one out? Like, why? Like, either stuff really happened in a certain way, and you just say, here's what happened.
That's it.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Like, you just go, here's what happened, or you work it out beforehand and you practice that stuff, and we'll see what he has worked out and what he hasn't practiced enough of later on. And then I think he goes to kind of creating somewhat of a look of thinking, a look there. And as you say, Greg, it's not great acting, and therefore he loses his place there. And so that's why we get this and he's not even ramped that up. We're going to get some elongated silence at a level that I have not seen in any of our videos. I've never seen it, that level. He's going to completely stall at one point. Greg, you got a thought?
Yeah, I was just going to say, if all of us were advising an attorney and they said, hey, we're going to put him on the stand, we'd say, why? Did you put this guy on the stand?
Yeah, we'll have to do better. Better than
The difference between murder 2 and murder 1, I think, is the only difference. Well, you just assured.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
So the conversation you had, did it lead to an argument?
Yeah, there was an argument because she wanted to go hang out with her friends, and I told her that she came on the trip, and she told me earlier that day, she said she was here to meet my family, to hang out. Like, so I was very confused, like, well, now you say you want to leave, but we just got here. So,
So what did you do next?
well, I told her I was going to go, and then there was, she started saying some very hurtful things and some very threatening things if I was to go and leave her to her solitary. Yeah, that was the next thing that confused me, was why are we getting threats all of a sudden?
Do you have any idea about what time of night this was?
This could have been somewhere, I'm going to estimate around 9 p.m.
So what did you do after that?
Well, I told her if you want to go, then go. Like I don't want you to be unhappy. If you don't want to be here, then don't be here. But up until now, like you said, you wanted to. So, I just need a moment. Well, what happened is I ended up staying in the bus with her.
What was she doing?
Well, she was having a fit, really. She was cussing and saying how shitty it was and how shitty I was for not giving her money to go have an Uber and like leave the vacation. And
All right, so you didn't think it was overly bright in the camper?
no, I didn't think it was overly bright. I think there might have been 5 to 7 candles lit. So
How many?
5 to 7 candles lit.
Okay, of varying sizes?
All the candles were about the same size, like a large,
Like a
sort of,
Yankee candle?
Candle, yeah,
Like, so you're
yeah, gesturing
about,
whatever it is.
to
8
me, it
inches,
looks like about,
7, 8
how many,
inches.
you're saying about 7 or 8 inches tall?
Yes,
And what's the diameter?
possibly like a 4-inch diameter.
Okay, so 7 or 8 of those large candles.
Right.
And what happened?
After her telling me to turn the candles off, and I said it's not that bright, like you could always just roll over. She got up and ran at me and grabbed one of the candles, and it was like all I could do to like grab the lid of it and like put it on top of it, and she like pulled it away and started swinging it at me and hitting me with it.
Where?
She hit me in like my neck and head and in my arms. I was like blocking. I think she might have like hit me in the chest. But I like wrestled the candle away from her, like put it back on the counter. And then there was like a flurry of punches and kicks. That she started punching and kicking me, and
Where?
in my shoulders and arms, my forearms.
Closed fist?
Yeah, closed fist, trying to punch my face, and I had to restrain her. I had to like physically grab her by her arms and like hold her arms down, and she kept kicking. She actually kicked Remy. And I had like sort of turned myself sideways, and I like pushed her back to the side of the bed, and I told her that that we're not your punching bags, and
You said what?
I told her that we weren't her punching bags.
We weren't.
She kicked Remy, and she was kicking me and punching me. And I pushed her back, and I told Remy, I was like, "Yo, we're gonna take a walk."
All right, Greg, what do you got?
So we're back to that factual, hands up, illustrating smooth cadence when he's discussing the candles this big and this big and this big. And he's moving a lot when he's talking about the candles, and he's telling, tone, downward tone. Then when he starts to talk about her hitting, he goes to up talk, and the illustrators disappear. And it's interesting. I said the minute she turns into Jackie Chan with all of her kicking and punching, his hand illustrators go away. You would expect him to be doing a lot of stuff, but he doesn't. His brow gets furrowed again, concern, and a halting cadence. Well, when you think about illustrators, we all call them something, or we may say them differently. I say it's your brain punctuating its thoughts. It's not punctuating what your mouth is saying, it's punctuating your thoughts. So when you don't have anything to punctuate, it drops, and we see that. And Scott, you always cite Vray's study on that. There's a lot of studies out there around it. And just anecdotal, interrogated 1,000 people, you're going to pick up 1,000 different ways people communicate, but illustrators are usually part of it. And you guys all know I can't talk without my hands, so it's just part of it. I think there's a whole lot of embedded truthfulness. Chase, you said it earlier, and I will keep reinforcing it. I think he uses something I've told you guys before. Barry Menkow told me, he said, fraud is the skin of the truth stuffed with lies. It's easier to make up details if you can visualize those details inside the van, inside the truck. And that's what I think we're starting to see. And, this guy's telling his part of the story the way he wants it heard. I'm going to go to one of yours, Scott. We always say every man's a hero of his own story. That's one of these. He's telling you how bad it was. One of the more interesting things that we'll see in this entire thing is he talks to his dog in complete sentences. Hey, buddy, I think we need to go outside. And his wife in phrases. Anybody else notice that? What the hell's going on there? That means I don't trust anything he said to his wife if he talks to his dog in complete sentences. So it's just a red flag for me to want to go back and say, why is he doing that? Other than that, I'm going to leave it there. There's plenty to go around. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, it's why it's such a good baseline, because as you said, Greg, he's very good at showing us, the vehicle on an uneven surface and stuff sliding, just as and that's going to be honest. Why would he lie about that? It's going to be honest, absolutely. And he's very good at narrating, body narration, illustrating those candles as well. Most likely that's credible. But as you say, when he gets onto hit me like in the head and the neck, like blocking, I think she might have hit me in the chest. There's no physical narration of that, and lots of possibility. Like, I know if somebody hits me in the chest, I wouldn't think it was possible. You know when somebody hits you I know when somebody touches me on the chest, let alone hits me. And if they hit me with a candle, like my head and in my head, no, I'm going to know it was exactly here on the back of my head and then on my neck, not anywhere between the two. But I wrestled the candle from her. I wrestled the candle. And here's the thing. We haven't had that kind of language in the baseline. He was very clear in that. So yes, you can absolutely go, hey, people of a certain age use the word like a lot. Sometimes I do podcasts when I'm with people of a certain age and I'll start using the word, like, because I'm fitting in. I'm changing my code around that to fit in. He's not doing it because of that, because he didn't do that in his baseline. He's doing that because he doesn't really have the story. I think there was a physical fight. There's a strong possibility of a physical fight, but not in the way that he's describing it there. Scott, what do you got on this one?
I think, again, what's interesting here is there's no change in his facial expression other than this eyebrow thing I'll talk about here in a second. It's just blank. There's nothing happening. We see no emotion in this fella at all. Not even a little bit, no smile, no frown. And one thing we haven't seen, he's talking about something horrible that happened to his wife. There's a grief muscle or any kind of furrowing up in the brow. Nothing in the chin boss. No sad, no nothing. We're not seeing anything from an emotional standpoint. He just looks bored as he's sitting there. But we do see moving the eyebrows really big. But when we see it, nothing. They don't stay very long. Doesn't stay very long at all. And one thing I always try to say is, when you see a really quick flash of an expression, fake won't stick. So if somebody's really not feeling that, they make a big one and it goes away quickly. It doesn't stay. It just goes away quickly. So he's trying to show he has feelings of sadness, I guess, or emotion about this, but he doesn't know how to do it. He's not good at doing that. So again, the largest movement is when he's in his eyebrows when he says, I had to restrain her. Then we see him go way up in a request for what I would say with Greg's thing, request for approval when he says that. So this must have been something that really made him feel that way, or the attorney pointed out, you've got to show emotion during this. And that was his, I'm going for it. And all he did was throw his eyebrows up. So, but then we see the same thing when he describes her kicking the dog. The eyebrows go up again, but they don't stick. They can go up for a minute, but then they'll come down slowly. They won't go up and they come right back down. In my experience, in a situation like that. So, and then he says, I pushed her back to the side of the bed. And when he says that, we see that blink flutter. So I think he's talking about a fight they must have been having or something going on as he's reliving that, as he's saying, I pushed her back on the side of the bed or whatever. I bet he did. I'll bet there's something, I bet there's a lot of pushing going on in there. So, but this might be the part where his attorney said, look, we got to make this believable, man. So I think maybe he's trying to get in and find a way to come up with these emotions because he's not good at faking it, because I don't think he's feeling much as far as that goes. Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, I very much agree. And I'm wondering, as I'm watching this morning, is the attorney here helping him to build a detailed mountain in the wrong place? She's asking him these detailed questions about the most irrelevant things in the story. What was the diameter of the candle? What would that diameter be of that candle? Every wick is the same size. I don't know why he would say a bigger candle would be brighter. I think wicks are the same size. I'm not a candleist, but maybe you know more than I do.
The candle crowd is going to get
Yeah. So let's talk about this narration of his injury. There's a hesitancy of movement. There's not any fluid movements of him moving his hands around to show things that are happening to him where they're happening. This is very much when Dr. Phil talked to a guy, I can't remember his name, but he said, where did she hit you? He said his girlfriend or wife was beating him up, and he goes, in the face.
What's that guy's name? Castellanos in the face.
Yeah. In this area. And that's what we're seeing here. It's like in my neck and head, not on my neck or right here on my neck. It's in my neck and head, in my arms, in the word in my arms. And he just does this in my arms, inside of them somehow. But suddenly during the description, Mark, you talked about it, the word like becomes very popular. It's injected everywhere. Let's break this down really quick. Lying is very hard work. So when somebody's lying, their brain's juggling a lot, and they might use words like to stall while they think. And it doesn't feel real. People telling the truth about emotional stuff are usually specific and clear. Using like makes it sound vague and disconnected, like I'm inviting you to join me in my uncertainty. That's what it sounds like to me. And hedging somebody's bets is another reason we hear this, saying she attacked me instead of she attacked me. It waters it down. It shows they're not fully committing to whatever they're saying. And it's maybe trying to sound natural. He might be thinking makes him sound more casual or believable, but it can really do the opposite if it's out of place. And it's very out of place right here. So always watch for sudden changes in how someone talks, especially if they start sounding less certain or emotionally detached. It's a sign that something is not adding up. And then he says, there's a flurry of punches and kicks. And this makes my brain go back to us talking about Jussie Smollett when he's talking about tussling on the street nonstop. This is passive voice. There was a flurry, not anything else. He's just describing a Tom and Jerry cartoon. Is all we really see. It's this little smoke cloud with legs and arms coming out of it. It's like he wasn't involved. But during the description of the assault, there's a significant drop in eye contact. There's bad body narration, lots of hesitancy. When somebody is 100% in victim mode, it can be a sign of deception. Listen to that. We hear just, I'm a victim, 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 victim. but it can also be an innocent person who's been coached or who's overly concerned with how they're being perceived. Johnny Depp is a great example of an open testimony where there's an open admission of socially inappropriate behavior, where you hear, I screwed up by doing X, Y, and Z.
All right, so you didn't think it was overly bright in the camper?
No, I didn't think it was overly bright. I think there might have been 5 to 7 candles lit. So
How many?
5 to 7 candles lit.
Okay, of varying sizes?
All the candles were about the same size, like a large,
Like a
sort of,
Yankee candle?
Yankee candle. Yeah.
Like, so you're
Yeah, gesturing.
about,
Whatever it is,
to
8
me, it
inches,
looks like about,
7, 8
how many,
inches.
you're saying about 7 or 8 inches tall?
Yes.
And what's the diameter?
Possibly like a 4-inch diameter.
Okay, so 7 or 8 of those large candles.
Right.
And what happened?
After her telling me to turn the candles off, and I said it's not that bright, like you could always just roll over. She got up and ran at me and grabbed one of the candles, and it was like all I could do to like grab the lid of it and like put it on top of it, and she like pulled it away and started swinging it at me and hitting me with it.
Where?
She hit me in like my neck and head and in my arms. I was like blocking. I think she might have like hit me in the chest. But I like wrestled the candle away from her, like put it back on the counter. And then there was like a flurry of punches and kicks. That she started punching and kicking me, and
Where?
in my shoulders and arms, my forearms.
Closed fist?
Yeah, closed fist, trying to punch my face, and I had to restrain her. I had to like physically grab her by her arms and like hold her arms down, and she kept kicking. She actually kicked Remy. And I had like sort of turned myself sideways, and I like pushed her back to the side of the bed, and I told her that that we're not your punching bags, and
You said what?
I told her that we weren't her punching bags.
We weren't.
She kicked Remy, and she was kicking me and punching me. And I pushed her back, and I told Remy, I was like, "Yo, we're gonna take a walk."
What did you do? Well, I believe you told us earlier it had been raining.
Yes, it was actually, yes. It was raining outside, so when I came back in, Remington and I were wet, so I grabbed a towel and dried Remy off and dried myself off. And I came back in. And
Where was Emily?
she was on the bed. I think she was like scrolling on her phone. And
So, what did you do?
I made a drink. I came in, I put my stuff down. I came in, made myself a drink, and had some more to smoke. Asked her if she was up for talking about why exactly she had a fit about the candlelight. And I don't know what she was saying. She was saying something, but it was just like she was just like muttering, so I couldn't really hear what she was saying.
Okay, then what happened?
Well, at some point there was I just need a minute. Yeah, there was a. Yeah, there was some muttering from her, and then I don't.
Chase, what do you got?
Nope, you're going to call somebody else when I start talking.
I won't, I promise.
Merry Christmas.
Go ahead, I promise I won't. I'm not going to.
All right, so right here, we got lots of fluid statements, no hesitancy until it's time to talk about what happened next after they came into the RV. And then we have this line here. She was saying something, but she was muttering. I'm paraphrasing this. This is where the stress really sets in. His breathing changes. It shifts way into his upper chest, way more internal dialogue where his eyes are down and to his left. We see a lot of hesitancy coming back into his behavior. This is the longest hesitancy I've ever seen, not even including the behavior panel. I've got thousands of hours outside the behavior panel looking at this stuff. This is the longest I've seen. And he spends it rehearsing and testing phrases in his mind, in my opinion. And there's so many things that he's trying to go through here internally that I think a lot of it might be a conflict with what he maybe said previously, and he's wanting to make sure he sells it. There's one point in here I want you to watch out for. He slips into emotional, which is downright when our eyes move downright. This is not 100%, but I think it's probably above 90. So he slips into this little emotional downright movement with his eyes, and it's emotional accessing. And the instant that it happens, he jerks his head back to the left, almost to force himself out of that emotional memory. You can watch it happen in this clip. It's a very telling sign that you won't see very often. But when the clip comes back on, let that movement stay in your memory for future conversations. So eye accessing cues are about where somebody looks when they're thinking, like up for memories, down for emotions, but they're not very reliable unless you know that person's normal behavior, in my opinion. So people are different. So not everybody looks the same way when they're thinking, and situations change that. So stress, fatigue, nervousness can change eye movements. And then we have cultural differences, how somebody was raised, the habits play a role. So down left is most often, though, tied to an internal dialogue or self-talk. Down right is usually about emotional stuff and feelings. Those are the two, in my opinion. I don't know if Greg disagrees, but in my opinion, those are the two that we can rely on most of the time. So watch for patterns across all behaviors instead of just looking at the eyes. The eyes, if you're just staring at somebody's eyes, you're going to miss a lot of the other stuff that's going on. We need to look at clusters and changes, obviously. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, totally agree. So look for patterns, And so with a pattern, you'll tend to have something and then the space between the something. Think about Morse code, for example, which is a pattern. You've got dots and dashes. And of course, to know that you've got a dot or a dash, the dot is shorter, the dash is longer, but you have to leave a gap between the two. There has to be space between the two in order to delineate one from the other, or it would just be one long, squeak. So every pattern must have space between it. And so what's great in looking at his pattern here is the amount of space he leaves between anything happen. It's a complete stall as far as I can see. It's a stop in terms of behavior, and it screams so loud because we've seen that incredible bass line where we don't get that. We've seen him do it slightly, I believe, in video 2, and now we've seen it escalate and ramp up to a level whereby it's a complete stall, it's completely nothing. So I always want people to look out for this. You're not just looking out for behaviors, you're looking out for absence of behaviors. You're looking for the nothings that happen. A bit like the artist Mondrian, he would look at the modern artist, he would look at the spaces between stuff. He wouldn't look at the branches of the trees. He'd look at what was between the branches of the trees and draw those and then abstract those into those colorful squares that you see. So look for the space between stuff. This is a great example of a massive chasm which screams out something is definitely up here. Greg, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, Chase, let's talk for a minute about eye movement, because I agree with you on the reliability. The two that are most reliable, in my opinion, are that down left internal voice as you're thinking to self, and that down right emotion. There's a really good example. I'll get to that one in just a second. I think the reason you see variation in people when there's stress is because they're not internalizing the question you're asking. And there's no consistent pattern across all human beings, period. You have to control the conversation and ask questions to be able to get a reliable sensory channel question. And when you ask the right question, you get the right answer. But if you ask a question about a concert, for example, that has audio, visual, maybe even emotional ties. And so you're scrambling channels in the person. To get it right, I have to ask you a very specific question. I did this to you, Chase, when we first met. Remember one time you said, I thought you would ask about me because you cared. We were going out on a boat there. And I said, who's out with you? And you went, ding. And I was like, yep, that's what I was looking for. Because it's a single sensory channel. That's all you're after. When you get that and you get to reliability, you do it a few times, you poke and prod. It is actually something that once you get good at it, it screams at you. And I agree with you. The other point is you can't simply assume and you can't simply focus on it. But if you get good enough at eyes, they just jump off the plate because they're so pronounced. But I agree with you 100% that those are the two most reliable. The rest of it, every person, I poke them and prod them. Some people don't move their eyes as much as they move their head. There's all kinds of little nuances. And all that stuff, people will beat up Bandler and all that. But that came out of all that work is where the first time I ever read any of that, like in 1988 or sometime back there. So this has been around for a long time. When you hear the eyes don't have it, the study, I don't know, you bring that one up all the time. It just says there's no reliable eye movement, no reliable eye pattern for lies. Doesn't have anything to do with what we're talking about here. So go and spend a little time looking. It's worth your time. It is a good one. I like it. I avoid it unless I got really good, clear ones. There's a really Chase perfect one for emotional because his head drops, his eyes drop down into his right, and his whole body curves. All that weight matters, and your whole body changes shape when that happens. And I think he's lost. I don't know that he's trying to rifle for information in such a way as trying to figure out which word goes where. I think he's like, where am I at on the script? I'm lost. I have no idea what's next. Because this is not a very easy way to understand what they're asking you about in the story. The way she's asking the questions is not necessarily the easiest to follow. It's back to, the play I went up on, Mark, was Ayn Rand's play, The Night of January 16th, one of the hardest plays because it's just talking and everybody says, and then what? And after that, and then what? And you just lose place. And I think that's what we're seeing. So if you're getting prepared to go on trial, small, succinct packages of data, what happened when you got in a fight? That's one thing. What happened when you went to bed? That's another thing. But if you're trying to remember a storyline, and I think this guy consumes a little bit of product along the way, and I think he's probably got some residual from that as well. So as you're looking at him, just pay attention. I love that snap of his head and the surprise in his eyes when he comes out of that. She threw him a life ring. It had been raining. That's an anchor point in the story, guaranteed. And then he comes back and he's talking about the dog being wet. It gives him a chance to talk. That lip bite, I think, is an adapter to release some nervous energy because his circuits are starting to fry. And Chase, the muttering, I listened to this whole thing. When it got to muttering, if I were sitting talking to a guy and he said she was muttering, I'd say, the woman who's just beating your ass with a candle is now muttering. That's not how people typically do. If they're angry enough to beat you with a candle, they're not over mumbling a few seconds later. So I want to dig in a little bit there and say, what exactly is going on in that story? So I'll give you when we talk about the scripted thing, I'll give you an example. If you've never done a play, if you've never been in that situation, but you've done big presentation in front of people and you're in a bind, corporate gig, and you lose your place in the slides, That's what this guy's going through, in my opinion. And you can think of it is a self-perpetuating problem, because then you just keep ramping up and ramping up and ramping up because you know you've lost your place, which turns off your frontal lobe and gets you to stop thinking and start reacting, which makes you lose your place. And the escalation is powerful, powerful stuff to watch. Scott, what do you got?
All right, I'm going to try to stay away from all the stuff you guys talked about. But with his first answer, he's got this, it's comparatively, compared to all the other things, he's kind of excited here. You know, I mean, there's not much going on, but when you compare it to the other stuff, it's kind of excited. His cadence and his tone of voice and volume's up a little bit. So that's a little bit different anyway. And his second answer has the movements from the earlier videos we watched. So he's pretty much just going, you know, along with that long pause, just going down the same little road here. And then when he talks about the muttering, and that's another thing, Greg, I agree with you on that. There are a couple of times in here we see him reacting to an emotional situation in a way that is opposite from the way you would act toward that situation. We're going to deal with another one in a couple of minutes. But I think that's odd there. So I think you've nailed it on that one. But when he talks about the muttering, he says, I couldn't really hear what she was saying. Then we see that classic backup thing. As he's saying that, he backs up a little bit. And when I'm dealing with entrepreneurs and teaching them how to pitch and how to talk to investors or someone to try to, as they're trying to be hired, let's say if they want to get on an entrepreneur's team, there are things you do and things you don't do. And one of the things you don't do when you're giving a fact, you don't back up a little bit as you're giving it, even no matter how much, because that tells the brain something may not be right here. Maybe they want to get away from this. So that's one of the things I always just squat on and make sure that I get that across to him. But that's what we see him doing here. So I think that's deception in this case when he's talking about I couldn't really hear what she was saying, because I say that because I think to him it was obvious he couldn't hear what she was saying. He didn't care what she was saying. So I think he may be trying to separate himself from that situation, not necessarily lying about the other part. So this is just starting to get, when you look at this for what it is, you could sort of see through this already. Then that long pause with that heavy breath and his voice clearing, I think he's trying to look sad during that. He's trying again to act and come up with these emotions that he doesn't have to try to gain the pity of the jury, or try to gain something from the jury to show that he's not a lizard or some kind of turtle or something that doesn't have emotions. So, and I don't think he's good at it.
What did you do? Well, I believe you told us earlier it had been raining.
Yes, it was actually, yes. It was raining outside, so when I came back in, Remington and I were wet, so I grabbed a towel and dried Remy off and dried myself off. And I came back in. And
Where was Emily?
she was on the bed. I think she was like scrolling on her phone. And
So what did you do?
I made a drink. I came in, I put my stuff down. I came in, made myself a drink, and had some more to smoke. Asked her if she was up for talking about why exactly she had a fit about the candlelight. I don't know what she was saying. She was saying something, but it was just like she was just like muttering. So I couldn't really hear what she was saying.
Okay, then what happened?
Well, at some point there was I just need a minute. Yeah, there was yeah, there was some muttering from her, and then I don't
And what was Emily doing?
she was laying in bed.
And where, if you know, was the Taurus?
The Taurus was under her pillow.
How do you know that?
That's where it was the last time that I had saw it,
When was that?
earlier that day.
Okay. That evening or that day?
That day.
Okay.
It was there all day.
Okay, so you take the Glock
Yes.
that already has the silencer on it, correct?
Yeah, it had a suppressor on it.
And what do?
I climb into bed, and as I'm climbing across Emily, her mutters turned into shouts, and I you have to climb over the person to get to, like, if this is my spot and this is her spot, this would be her. Like, you have to climb over her to get to here. So I was climbing over her, and she shouted, "Go off," and she threw an elbow at me, and elbowed me in my groin.
Did that hurt?
Yeah, it hurt. It was right to my genitals.
Did you say anything when she said "F off"?
I didn't say anything when she said "F off." I got hit in the groin, and I said, "No more hitting." And so we had a bunch of throw pillows that we lined around the bed, the top of the bed where we slept. So one of the throw pillows was right there, and I swatted her with the throw pillow, and I said, "Stop hitting." And that's when it happened.
What happened?
Mark, what do you got?
Yeah. So look, here I am. I'm up in Canada, and our gun culture up here in Canada is very different from the gun culture down in the US. So I really don't know anything about, what these guns may be, but I do know this one thing, and not enough. So this is more of a question for everybody. They talk about a silencer, a suppressor. Both terms are used, and that the male's weapon has a suppressor on it. And so I go, in my mind, right, why would you? Now, I understand why you take guns camping, because it's a gun, it's America, it's a gun culture. You want to have, and also, yeah, you could be fearful. You might be out in the middle of nowhere. Yeah, it might be animals, there might be people that you don't. So I totally understand that. I get it. I absolutely get that, okay? What I don't get is why you'd have a suppressor on it. Because if it were me, and I say, I'm in Canada, I'm English and Canadian, British and Canadian, it's not the same gun cultures, okay? But if I was taking a gun to protect me from the outside world, I'd want it to make a noise, because the noise could be helpful. The noise would alert other people. The noise could scare off an animal. If it were an animal, it could scare off a human being, if it's a human being. I just go, what are the reasons you'd attach a suppressor to your weapon going camping? I get why you'd take one camping, but I don't know. Now, so in my critical thinking path here, there's always the opportunity in critical thinking to ask people, to go, hey, help me, because I may have jumped to a wrong conclusion. My conclusion is, hey, this looks a little bit premeditated. He's going to fire a weapon silently. So it doesn't, but I could be wrong. I could be wrong. So Chase, I'll go to to you next. Can you give me any reasons why you would attach a suppressor to your weapon when going camping?
Yeah, and as a Canadian, I'd like to be the first person to teach you to start using the word "can" when you're around Americans, and just put a can on there.
Put a can on it. All right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, the two good reasons. Number one, a suppressor for most weapons lowers the audible threshold to below the requirement for having hearing protection. So, if you're just plinking out, maybe it's a 22. We don't know whether it's a 9mm or 22. If you're just plinking ammo on a range,
Right.
you can talk. You don't have to wear hearing protection. Number two, and maybe most importantly, instantly when you put a suppressor on the gun, you feel like James Bond, and that might be what we're dealing with here. That may be what it is. But as far as the clip goes, there's a loss of hesitancy and all this, and it's pretty obvious. But when he says that I got hit in the groin, passive voice, and I have no doubt, listen to it again, no doubt that the throw pillows are exactly where he says that they are, because he's fluid and he's comfortable doing all that. And then it goes back into this, like, just building a story with hesitancy, loss of fluency. And he says, that's when it happens. That's like acting out of a Hollywood movie. And he kind of stutters, repeats himself again, and it's like straight out of a what's it? Like a cop TV show, whatever. I'm trying to think of the name of it. Law and Order. It's straight out of Law and Order. So I think he forgot to do the same repetitive statement for all the other stressful things, because that's not in his baseline at all. It looks like acting to me. And as far as suppressors go, maybe they had that suppressor. So to get a suppressor in the United States, you need something called a tax stamp from the ATF. So a suppressor is what's called an NFA item, or National Firearms Act item. And you need to go through this crazy process with fingerprints and all this stuff to get it. Maybe they had that because they're out there target shooting or something like that. Under the pillow with the suppressor, if I'm using this for defense, I want the shortest barrel possible so that I'm as mobile as I can be with that handgun. And I definitely want to make a noise, because no matter how well trained you are, you can miss a shot. And if I miss, I at least want it to act as a flashbang while my next shot is being placed. Greg, I got to pass it to you. And also, I don't know if I would buy my wife a Taurus.
I will say this: if I were buying a Taurus and a Glock, my wife would get the Glock. I want her to have the most reliable. Look, I'm the last convert on earth to Glock. I grew up in the era of Tupperwares for food, not for guns. But I have to admit, it's the AK of handguns, and things you can't screw them up. They just work. So my wife would have the Glock. I wouldn't give her the Taurus. Mark, they may not even make threaded barrels for Taurus. It's a lower end gun. It just is. It's not as expensive. You're not going to put as much effort into it. I since got a picture, but if you've got a suppressor on a Glock 19, which is what he used, it's about that long.
Okay, so it's a 9.
That's a lot. Yeah, that's a lot of handgun under your pillow. A lot of handgun under your pillow. And I'm with you, Chase. I'm inside a bus. The ability to move that stuff around, the ability to get a good sight pattern, the ability to get all that stuff is just awkward when you got it on there. And you're right, it just makes you cooler is what he thinks. I agree with you 100%. Probably made him feel cool. But if you're going to murder somebody, getting an ATF stamp is probably a bad idea, because it's really easy to know the gun and all that kind of stuff. Let's talk about some of his body language, and then just a few weird things, behavior. She's laying in bed. She was laying in bed. Well, okay, got it. Why? Why did he pause suddenly on that word? And then he purses his lips in a big way, and he shakes his head no. All that happens when he says she was laying in bed. Now, there could be, in my head, 3 things. It could be, is that what I'm supposed to say? I think I missed it. It could be denial of what his mouth just heard, his brain just heard his mouth say. And it could be, where am I in the storyline? I'm lost. It could be any of those 3 things. Don't know. So I just want to pay attention. But he had no illustrators when he's doing this. Again, he uses illustrators when he's telling us everything about where the pillows are, all this other stuff. but he doesn't use it there. And I agree with you, Chase. I think those are factual. He's retrieving data. This is the skin of the truth stuff with lies, fraud, Barry Mancow all over again. Then they ask this question: how did you know that the gun was there? Well, I'll tell you how I would remember it. She pulled it on me. She pulled it on me. So I know it was there. I wouldn't have to say I knew from earlier in the day. That would be the single most important and powerful memory of the day, if not your life. But when he says, I saw it earlier in the day, he goes to uptone. Does anybody know whether the gun was really there or not? I would wonder. There's also a place in this thing, I didn't put the video in, where he talks about rearranging the guns earlier in the day before he went out of the thing. So he must have several guns in this place, and I didn't do all the detail. So come on, there's one point right there where I would say, hold on, single most important moment of your entire life, which you're about to go to prison the rest of your life about, and you didn't say she pulled it on me? You said, I saw it earlier in the day? So now he's back to prepared stuff and the facts. He gets back to all the mechanical memory. It's pretty clear to see when he goes to the pillows were here, this was there, this was here. He says no more hitting with about as much expression and emotion as I said. No more hitting, Mark. If you're about to get into a real physical altercation, somebody's just been beating your ass with a glass jar candle because he talked about putting the lid back on it, and she hits you again, and she hits you in the groin, don't you think you would have a little residual emotion from that? It just doesn't fit. It doesn't fit anything we've seen. It just doesn't feel normal. I think he's weaving this red pillow into the picture because that's what he shot her through. According to state, the state said in their opening statements that he held a red pillow over her face and shot her twice. Fraud is the skin of the truth stuffed with a lie. Mark, what do you got?
No, Scott.
All right, it's me.
Scott.
All right. Yeah, I'll just go over a couple of things here because there are two things here that tell me, oh, this is all I want to talk about, is she elbows him in the groin and he hits her with a pillow, right? When? She does that, was it 15 minutes later when he got up off the ground? I mean, when did that happen? You know, and then they're both going to bed with guns under their pillows.
And fighting.
Well, yeah, and fighting. And then having a suppressor on your gun in something that small. If somebody's going to get in, if you're camping, again, you're right. It's going to happen from here. There's not going to be any throwing your arm out and making a scene and doing anything like that at all. If you got close to somebody, you don't want something out here wobbling around where they can just pull it to the side. This is crazy talk, what he's describing here. This is where he messed up, I would think. I mean, if any of us were there, we'd go, nah, dude, no. Yeah, you did it. So this is crazy. I don't think any of that happened. I think, and Greg, you're going to sum it up at the end. I think what you thought happened is what happened here. And I'm not going to hog it and pretend I came up with it. But you told me what you thought earlier, and don't say it here. We'll say it at the wrap up. But I think this is an important video here because I think this is where you can look at any of this and go, nah, this isn't right. And then the other attorney should have said, hey, let's talk about this when it came their turn to talk to him about it. Let's go back to that and just peel that whole thing apart.
And what was Emily doing?
She was laying in bed.
And where, if you know, was the Taurus?
The Taurus was under her pillow.
How do you know that?
That's where it was the last time that I had saw it.
When was that?
Earlier that day.
Okay. That evening or that day?
That day.
Okay.
It was there all day.
Okay, so you take the Glock
Yes.
that already has the silencer on it, correct?
Yeah, it had a suppressor on it.
And what do?
I climb into bed, and as I'm climbing across Emily, her mutters turned into shouts, and you have to climb over the person to get to, like, if this is my spot and this is her spot, this would be her. Like, you have to climb over her to get to here. So I was climbing over her, and she shouted, "Off," and she like threw an elbow at me, and elbowed me in my groin.
Did that hurt?
Yeah, it hurt. It was like like right to my genitals.
Did you say anything when she said "F off"?
I didn't say anything when she said "F off." I got hit in the groin, and I said, "No more hitting." And so we had like a bunch of throw pillows that we like lined around the bed, like the top of the bed where we slept. So one of the throw pillows was right there, and I swatted her with the throw pillow, and I said, "Stop hitting." And that's when it happened.
What happened? What happened?
She said, "That's it. You're dead." And she threw her arm under her pillow, and she pulls her hand out with the Taurus. And
How were you feeling?
I was feeling horrified. Just
Were
like,
you afraid?
I was terrified. Like there was like as soon as I saw that, like I just felt like this like wave of heat, like just like red hot. And she started like pushing her body up in an instant, and I'm like, no, 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 no. And like I don't know, like she wasn't stopping. And I had I was holding my Glock, and she started just like coming up at me, and I just fired.
Why?
She was gonna shoot me.
And you were afraid.
Very.
You fired twice.
That's
Do you
right.
remember firing twice?
All I remember is like feeling like three things. It was like I felt like it was like boom, 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 and it was like 2 shots, and then her body like dropping, like
That's what you remember.
that's what I felt. Yeah.
That's what you saw.
Yes.
But I asked you what you felt.
Yeah. Oh yeah. 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 I felt the. Just horrified. And. Yes, it was terrible.
Oh, Lord. All right, Chase, what do you got?
Nope. You're going to do it.
I'm not going to do anything, man. I haven't done anything.
All right. Obviously,
Okay. Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so look, he describes an emotion here, and we'll get to how he isn't able to describe an emotion later on, but he does describe an emotion as a wave of heat and red hot. How did it feel? A wave of heat and red hot. That's a really intense description of physically and mentally what's happening. That is a flash of red. That's potentially, he may well be describing rage and adrenaline at this point. And I think that's likely real. That's likely real, that he potentially loses emotional control at this point. Now, here's what's interesting. The lawyer says, you were afraid. Asking him again, what was your emotion? You were afraid, and offers an emotion. He just says, very. Now, normally I would say in general, when I ask people, emotion to describe their emotions, often I will offer them one. And the reason I offer one is because if I've hit the right emotion, they'll pick up on it. So if I go, "You were afraid," they might go, "Yes, I was very afraid."
Yep.
Yeah. So they will repeat the emotion. They will often escalate it as well. And they'll often confirm it as well. You get a confirmation, sometimes an escalation, and a repeat of the word. Or they'll go, "No, I was sad, really sad." So they might give me an alternative feeling if I've offered one. He just goes, "Very," which I would say is unusual. So I don't think he really knows the emotion that he has, or he hasn't practiced this as part of the story. And this is important if you want to be a good liar. You not only need to practice the events, okay, you need to practice the feelings that you were having as well. So you can describe those feelings and confirm those feelings if others give those to you, or say you weren't feeling that, you're feeling this instead. He hasn't practiced any of that. And he may well have not been feeling the kind of feelings we might expect. He may well have been feeling this rage that we potentially have at the start. He then looks for approval around this action story that he kind of teases out, but again can't access the feeling that she's looking for. I don't know. Maybe they have rehearsed this. She's trying to feed him. Look, this is where you say the feeling, and he's can't. To your point, Greg, he can't remember the script. Well, we can see he's got that high breathing going on. Adrenaline is going on. The one thing that adrenaline gets rid of is your short-term memory. So if you practice something the day before, not under stress, you're not going to remember it the next day. You've got to prep just so when you rehearse for a performance, you have to rehearse with the emotions, or you forget your lines.
Tell that story. Tell that story where you about the political person, and you do.
Oh yeah. So yeah, when I'm training people, and it can be politicians, and they can be running countries at the time, I stress test them. So I will I'll get them running around, get them run around the block. Sometimes with their security, can look very odd. Yeah, run around the block, run up and down the room. Yeah, get them stressed out. Sometimes I will roll up a magazine and poke them or give them a few hits. Again, sometimes security is there and I have to go, "Do you mind? This is going to happen right now. Don't get upset. Don't get worried." Yeah, and you give them a few nasty little taps on the back of the head. It's really annoying when you do. It doesn't take long if you just slap the back of their head for the rage to start, and then they've got to deliver their answers, their content. He hasn't stress tested this. So he chooses just horrified as an emotion, horrified as an emotion, weird one to pick. It's a bit of a long word. And then he gives an evaluation. It was terrible. She's asking for emotion. He says horrified and then evaluates. It was terrible. He can't access a feeling around this. That's bad news for him. Greg, what do you got on this one?
So Mark just told you he did not coach Biden or Trump because neither one of them is running around the block.
Yeah, they'd be keeled over, would kill them. Yeah.
So if you watch what this guy's doing, he starts off with his chin down, covering his throat. It's really a shame you can't see his chin, because we would think if there's any grief at all or any shame at all, it would show up in his chin, but we can't see it. So because it's under facial hair, it's tough. But he's protecting his throat. His chin is all the way down. His head's down. We haven't seen any grief in that muscle and that series of muscles in the forehead. Scott, you brought it up early, but even now we haven't seen it. He's up to now talking about what happened. So let me ask you a couple of questions. He wrestled a candle out of this woman's hand and took it away from her when she was beating him up with it. And yet he sits and watches her pull a gun out and has no choice but to shoot her with a long weapon that he has to pull up. Anybody want to screw with the physics on that one for a minute and say, look, it's a lot quicker for me to put the same hand I was going to use to grab your hand and stop you. And he's stronger than her, clearly. There's a whole lot of logic here that would cause me to want to probe in and wait a minute, let's talk about where was the pistol exactly? Not under a pillow, exactly where was it? But of course, this woman is trying to get him to tell his story, not trying to interrogate him. This is part of the reason, Chase, that I think a confession is easier to get when you're not in this room. Of course, nobody's going to interrogate you. I heard he did really poorly on Rouse, but this was just a good example. You didn't need any more than this to see it. He's been restraining her. There's a come-on remark for me. Why would I believe that? He turtles a lot, and there's no eye contact in this one. His neck is shrinking into his body. His chin's down across his throat. I think there's a rescue here where she's trying to protect him and get him back online, to your point, Mark. There's things he had scripted that he was supposed to say. And I'm not accusing her of saying, here's what you exactly need to say, but this is what I'm going to ask you. We all know that attorneys prep their clients. It's just part of it. When he does that drop of the head, I think he is trying to be pitiful, not out of fear or anything else. I think he's trying to start this method of looking pitiful. The interesting piece when he does it, she asks him how he felt. She's trying to feed him that data, and he says what he saw instead of how he felt. She has to coax out of him that whole rage thing, and it's entirely possible that he felt rage and he went in and did this when the woman's there, and she had no involvement whatsoever. It's also, the more interesting piece of that is when you can't tell the story works together and can't add emotion to it, that's distancing from the story. You're trying to push away from it, and you don't have any way to understand how it all goes together. The last thing I'll say is this. He says, I remember 3 things. Well, if you put a pillow over somebody's head and pull the trigger twice, that's 3 things. Again, could be just using the same things he said, because he said he heard shot, and her fall. Interesting. If you're an interrogator, you go, let's talk about those 3 things. Tell me which order they happened, what happened, exactly how this worked, where was the pistol when she pulled it out. You would take the story apart, you would go forward and backward pass, and you'd get a lot more details, but not the purpose of this conversation. Scott, what do you got?
All right. Well, I answered the first couple of questions. We see a cluster of cues there that let us know something's up. He starts getting smaller and smaller. When you rewatch this, go back and watch him. He starts getting lower. He starts backing up. It's like he's shrinking. He's the incredible shrinking man. He starts turtling. His head starts coming down. All that, and then we see a couple of single shoulder shrugs in there. That just lets you know that doesn't specifically mean anything, except for, in my experience and from what I've heard from hundreds of other people in our position, it just suggests that they're not sure about their answer. They're not confident with it. Doesn't necessarily mean they're lying or telling the truth. It just suggests that they're not confident, a loss of confidence. And then we see lots of wobbling going on in there when he gets there too. Then as he continues to shrink and move back some, you have to think about this. He's talking about the worst thing this horrible thing that's happened. The worst things that ever happened to him. He's just, tagged his wife, and she's not with us anymore. And he's talking about that. We're not seeing anything change emotionally. No grief, like you were saying, Greg. No, nothing. Everything is the same as it was in the very first video when she was talking to him. I don't think this guy cares. I don't think he cares about it. His voice tone and volume are a little louder, where in reality, when you're talking about that, what I've seen most of the time, probably you have too, it gets quieter and gets softer when you start talking about something that horrible, something that horrific. And then the entire time we've seen this, we haven't seen any big expression come across his face. Happiness, sadness, grief, disdain, nothing big, except for the eyebrow movement we see up there a little bit. That's it. That's all. All right, Chase, what do you got?
Yeah, there's no emotion on the face. It's crazy. There's no more eye contact, no movement, except for one little bit of eye contact that we do see here. And that's where he says, that's what I felt. Or no, that's when he says she was going to shoot me. And he looks up and makes sure, and kind of looks around and makes sure people are buying it. The hesitancy's off the charts. Loss of fluency might be one of the most obvious deception statements, maybe top 20 that we've done here on the show.
Yep.
If you're an attorney asking a lot of baseline questions to a known deceptive person gives a jury a very obvious baseline to compare the rest of the story to. If you're asking them a lot of truth questions and then a lot of hard ones, you need to know as an attorney that that's going to look really weird to the jury. I think the attorney might have made an error here. I've seen this backfire before. So the attorney tells their client, I want you to know you have all the time you need. Don't be afraid to take your time. If you need to think before you answer, take that time. It's your time. This backfires because it gives suspects or witnesses an excuse to stall. And they think that they're being smart by taking that time. And this also becomes a power move when I think that I'm taking some kind of control over the courtroom because my attorney told me that I can do this. It's my time. I get to take this time. My attorney told me, and it backfires. I've seen it happen many times. So it becomes a power move when somebody needs to feel more control, and it's exaggerated when somebody's been advised by an attorney to take these pauses. Y'all covered everything else. Let's have a go.
Just one added point to that. When you get into cross and they use mostly leading questions, then you don't get the chance to, because it's yes and no and driven, and now you're screwed because you better do the same thing. I agree with you 100%. That's a dangerous thing.
Yes, it was terrible.
Did you shoot her because you were angry?
No. Yeah, it was like she wasn't gonna stop, and like that was the only way. Like it didn't didn't have to be like that. Like
Question?
I'm giving my witness time to recover. He's having some difficulty. Okay, so are you ready to continue?
maybe just a moment.
So, Joseph, okay. What happened after you shot her?
I yelled at her. Like, I said, "Are you fucking kidding?" And like, why the hell would you do that?
Did you know she was dead?
I picked her up.
Joe, you're asking for a sidebar escort, but don't come up.
May we approach briefly? Yeah, very briefly.
All right, Mark, what do you got?
Yeah, so we're seeing some bad acting here for a couple of reasons. There's the moment, so he's doing the crying, not doing a bad job. I mean, not doing it's okay-ish. I've seen worse actually. It's not getting it's close to having something of an effect. Okay, but we see him clock the lawyer, take a look at the lawyer or somebody to go like, are you buying this? Am I doing this well? Is this good? I don't think he gets the reaction that he's looking for. And so he does what I've seen, student actors and bad actors do again and again and again is they realize internally that they're not having the feeling and that it isn't getting across. And so they start to hide because they go, if you can't see my face, then you won't see that this just isn't working and it's not having the effect. Whereas great actors do it for the audience and they give it out for the audience. And also in real life, if you're having a strong emotion, there is a period of time where you just don't know anybody's watching you. You don't care. Like the neurological change and that's happening, the neurons that are firing off, because emotions, big emotions, like you're not having those all the time. And if you're having big emotions all the time, you need to seek help. That's not healthy to be having big, strong emotions all the time. We have them now and again, and we can only sustain them for a small amount of time. They're huge energy sucks. They take a massive amount of energy to do because we're trying to get an effect. We're trying to change the world around us to make things better or, to change stuff for us. That's why we have these emotions. By the way, great book by Ekman. In fact, I think Ekman's best book is Conversations with the Dalai Lama, where he talks about, in a conversation, the evolutionary reason why we have emotions and discusses that with the Dalai Lama. Really great book, better than any other book I think he came up with. So emotions are expensive. We don't have them that often. So when we do have them, we don't know how to work ourselves with them. And so there's a moment where we just wouldn't know if anybody's watching us or care if anybody's watching us. Yes, then we can become socially aware, and then we might try and hide it, or we might try and push it out more. We could have all kinds of reactions. But he's just having a bad actor reaction to this one. Scott, what do you got on this one?
Yeah, I think his attorney knows he's odd, and she knows something's not right here. And she knows he's going to look like a lizard to the jury. So that's why she keeps trying to just pull these statements about how he felt about things, about emotion, so that they can see he's just not just a turtle sitting there or an apple or a carrot. You can see something's actually going on emotionally, so he could possibly feel sorry for what happened. And I don't think she's not able to do it because he's not showing anything. That's all I'm going to focus on right there. He's not showing any emotion at all. And the acting that he's doing, you're right, Mark. It's just, man, it's bad. Greg, what do you got?
Yeah, Mark, I think he had a really good acting teacher. I think it was Murdoch. Because it doesn't say that. That's with a finger check. I would think, yeah. I was surprised you didn't mention his little solo shift. Yeah, so he does that. When he says it didn't, he does it right after he says it didn't need to be like that. And I'll tell you, if you go watch this video, you'll see the only real emotion he shows is when he says, I'm thinking about what happened to my life as a result of this. But when he puts his head down like he thinks that, Mark, look, he's not looking. He does that quick head up and does a threat check as he looks up, one of the fastest we see in the entire thing. And I think he thinks this is what pitiful looks like. And it's just, I'm not going to go on and on and on about this, but it's bad acting, number one. He goes down the well, and it's something I've called transfer, and Scott's called transfer in our true crime workshop, is about being emotionally unavailable. That's part of the thing. People who really are feeling intense emotion, like you said, Mark, they're not available because they don't care or contact. And people who are really bad actors don't understand that that's what's going on. They try to do the same thing so they can get away from it. I've seen it time and time again, missing children. Like, remember Teresa Balboa and all that. I'm just so emotional and all that kind of thing. It's a way to distance yourself from other people and be unapproachable. But you can't do it. I mean, people who are crying snot-nosed and all that, they're not worried about what you think. People who are worried about what you're thinking and clocking and looking to see what you think, that's fake. Chase, what do you got?
Exactly what I was thinking. If you see someone who is having their head down in this display of emotion, and the first thing they do when they look up is to scan the room to see if people believe them and to see if people bought the story. This is called a confirmation glance. And it's bad, bad, bad news when you see it after an emotional display. Keep that in mind. If you see it after an emotional display, that's when it's very bad. And all this physical portrayal of emotion, but there's no real emotion on the face. Dr. Paul Ekman, Mark, as you mentioned, did beautiful research on this. The emotion that you're seeing here is stress. There's a high blink rate. There's increase in breathing rate and breathing location into the chest. There's artery protection where the arms kind of stick in toward the torso. Then there's organ protection where he lowers down to bring their rib cage over those vital organs down there, checking for tears. A lot of stress here and perception management. This is a giant proposal of emotion is what I'm going to call it. It's a proposed emotion, but there's nothing really there. There's no evidence of grief, sadness, regret, anger, or even bargaining, which we usually see when people shoot somebody and it's not murder, is an instant shift to denial, anger, and or bargaining. So it's a very common reaction, but all we're seeing here is a proposal of emotion. He's offering that up. It's a suggestion that there's something emotional going on, but there isn't. Mark and I love the point about it's not working, so I'm going to hide. Now I'm going to let them project onto me what they think is going on here.
Yes, it was terrible.
Did you shoot her because you were angry?
No. Yeah, it was like she wasn't gonna stop, and like that was the only way. Like it didn't didn't have to be like that. Like
Question?
I'm giving my witness time to recover. He's having some difficulty. Okay, so are you ready to continue?
maybe just a moment.
So, Joseph, okay. What happened after you shot her?
I yelled at her. Like, I said, "Are you fucking kidding?" And like, why the hell would you do that?
Did you know she was dead?
I picked her up.
Joe, you're asking for a sidebar escort, but don't come up.
May we approach briefly? Yeah, very briefly.
All right, we've had time to watch these videos and see what went on. We've come up with our own little verdicts of what's happened. Mark, what's your verdict?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the actual verdict from the jury was guilty, and that's not a surprise, is it? I think this is a great set of videos. If you're a subscriber, and I hope you are, and if you're not a subscriber, make sure you subscribe. Please do, and make sure you pass this episode on to somebody you know, somebody you care about, somebody who you'd like to get interested in this, because I think this one is a lovely one in terms of the simplicity of how you can find deception. as Chase always says, it's not just, well, as we all always say, it's not just one signal, but Chase does really go on about it because it's so important. It isn't just one signal, it's many signals, but in this case, they're all there, they do mount up on each other, and we've got some of the most extraordinary behavior of just getting stalled in a lie, stalled in a story and not knowing where to go. So lovely find, Greg. Chase, what's your verdict on this one?
Yeah, my verdict is this is just bizarre, but it's a great teaching tool, Mark, just like you were saying. And if you're in the business of human beings, which I think you are, if you interact with other human beings, you need to be in the business of change detection. You don't have to memorize this list of 95 little behaviors. You don't have to do that if you are very good at knowing how to spot changes in what's going on. They usually act like this. Now something's different. Now you know where to pay attention. So change detection is the way ahead. This was great, and it was a great example of some textbook examples. And it was another great example of, if someone acts weird, my job number one is, do they always act this way? If I see weirdness, I might think maybe these people own tigers and they go to the store at 3 a.m. to buy milk. So, and they have just this bizarre lifestyle. Maybe they've got that going on. So when I see something unusual, is this a common thing for that person? Great. What do you got?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of baseline, as you guys all know. The reason I liked having a good baseline video on here and being able to say, this is not his baseline at home eating Cheetos on the couch. This is him under duress, starting from a point and being able to clearly tell when something deviates from that baseline because he's given a stressful question or someplace he's not prepared for. I would say, added to that, this guy prepared and had a story in his head and how he's going to deliver it. And the worst thing possible is to lose that story. He's in the middle of his PowerPoint and doesn't know what a word he put on there meant and starts to cascade out of control. So what I see, I think the guy lost the jury there, and standing in front of the jury was a stupid thing for this guy to do. People may have had some doubt, and he probably erased it with the way he behaved. What I would also finally tell you is you don't need to be a rock star body language guy to start this tomorrow. You can find a thing about a person. If they always pick their nose and they stop picking their nose when they tell you something, wonder about that. That's all you got to do is start looking for deviation from one thing, and that will give you the ability to start looking for deviation in others. Scott, what do you got?
I really like this one. I like it because we've not because we've seen somebody do something horrible or saw someone who did something horrible, but we're looking at someone who's done something just as horrible as some of the other people that we talk about on here. But his approach, his execution, it's totally different than everybody else's. There's no emotion here. We've seen people without emotion, but not like this flat, almost flat affect going on the whole time. So I really like this. I'm not going to say this guy's a psychopath because there's no way to tell from what the small amount of video we've seen, and I never talked to the guy. I don't know. And I don't think they've run anything on him to check and see. But I think it's really interesting to see somebody talk about things that should be so horrible, but have absolutely no reaction to them emotionally. I think that's really interesting to see. So I really like this one. I'll probably be watching not all 7 hours, but there's got to be somewhere in there where he has some kind of emotion erupt. Even a little bit, So, all right, Bill, this is another good one, and we'll see you next time.